If you keep scanning verbal reasoning passages but you still run out of time, it's probably because you're actually reading it instead. So I'm going to show you the KSSS method to scan properly and answer faster. My name's Farhan, I'm a junior doctor, and I've helped over 100 students get into medicine and dentistry across Australia. And today, you're going to learn how to pick which words to scan, how to scan for them, and how to use context and synonyms to answer questions faster. So, what is scanning? Essentially, it's a very algorithmic step-by-step approach which is designed to help you with timing. The reason you should pay attention is because it's one of the easiest methods to learn, and it's also very effective for some of these questions that can come up in verbal reasoning. Now, as with any skill, it is highly dependent on doing a lot of practice. So after you take the method from today, you have to do practice to make it stick. So let's hear it, the KSSS method. It stands for keyword, scope, synonym, and scan. So keyword is all about picking one singular clear keyword from the question. Scope is about making sure it doesn't come up everywhere in the passage. Synonym is considering one or two natural rephrasings of your keyword and then finding that in the passage. And scanning is just a reminder that you're not reading the entire passage just to find the word, but you're glossing your eyes over the passage to almost catch the keyword so that you're not wasting your time. So let's get into it. Let's begin with keyword. Keyword extraction is all about picking out a word from the question that you think is likely to appear in the passage. So we're going to do a little exercise. Right? Here's a question for us to go through. So I've purposefully omitted the passage because I want you to really focus on the keywords here. I want you to think, what are words that we can take away from the question so that we can really easily find them in the passage that will lead to our answer here. And hopefully you're already seeing a couple come up here. And for me, I think Fleming, penicillin, and early 20th century are good ones to pick. Fleming is a name, that's not going to change. Penicillin is something somewhat specific. I mean, you could have the synonym of antibiotics, for example, but penicillin can work. And early 20th century is a good one because it actually means any date that you see in the passage that is in the early 20th century is scannable. So, with that said, why don't we have a go at this? Given those keywords, have a go at finding this question. So once you've had a go at this question, hopefully you can find penicillin, Fleming, and 1928 all as the keywords that we're kind of looking for here. And then so this answer ends up being true. Fleming did, in fact, discover this penicillin thingy in 1928. So next, let's go to scope, making sure it's low scope or that it doesn't come up everywhere. Scope, as per my definition here, is basically, I want you to think of it as a likelihood of the word coming up. So the more likely a word is to come up, the worse of a choice it is, because it means that the word comes up everywhere, which means you can't find a specific point. You're looking at all of the passage and it doesn't actually help you scan for the answer any faster. So the way that you decide what's low scope and high scope is obtaining some context from topic mapping to determine which are kind of the high scope words you want to avoid. So if you don't know what topic mapping is, I've already got a video on it, go and watch that, but it essentially helps you scan faster. So I want you to have a look at this question now and think, what are going to be some high scope and low scope words? Same passage that we just worked on. Hopefully you're seeing that Denmark is a good option because it might not come up that often, but antibiotics might not be so good because the entire passage is really about antibiotics. So we want to look for the word Denmark. So where do we find Denmark? It's right here. So let's read what it says. Denmark banned the use of growth-promoting antibiotics in animal feed in 1999, yada, 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 with no detrimental effects on livestock productivity. And so Denmark's ban on growth-promoting antibiotics in animal feed led to a decreased livestock productivity. Well, this one says that there was no impact on it. So that's a direct contradiction, an incorrect link. Therefore, the answer here is false. And that's what we get here. Now, if you're liking the KSSS method so far, this is just one of the many methods that I have for the UCAT. If you want all of my UCAT frameworks in one place, then you can click the first link in the description below. Otherwise, let's move on to step number 3, which is synonyms. So you want to consider one or two natural rephrasings of questions. The reason is because, look, the UCAT's sneaky and they love pulling nasty tricks like rewording keywords in the passage because they know a lot of people almost dogmatically try and look specifically for these keywords. And so they hide them under the guise of synonyms. So for example, heart becomes cardiac, carbohydrate becomes sugar, the economical sector becomes financial sector, and vehicle might become modes of transportation. So keep these in mind when you're scanning for keywords. Another thing you can add on top is looking around the keyword for contextual words. So, for example, insulin is a hormone, and hormones get released in the blood. So if you see the word release, that might be something to look around for things to do with hormones. Diabetes is a disease. So likewise, if you see the word disease, then that might be a signal that the word diabetes is somewhere nearby. And same thing for sugar and intake. So it can just aid you in finding your keywords faster while scanning. So what I want you to do is have a look at this question, right? Major drug manufacturers have exited antibiotic development due to low profitability. And I want you to think in your head, what are some synonyms that could exist for some of these words? And I'll show you some that you could potentially rephrase to like this. So drug manufacturers could become drug companies or pharmaceutical companies. Exited could have been withdrawn. Antibiotic development could become antibiotic research. And low profitability could just mean poor financial returns. And then so, I mean, look, it's pretty leading because I've just given you the synonyms there. But if you now look for some of those synonyms, and hopefully you've done your topic mapping to know that the information you're looking for is in the fourth paragraph here, then you can quite easily find this. Major pharmaceutical companies have largely withdrawn from antibiotic research due to poor financial returns. So this one ends up becoming true. And it's actually an example of a question that you can't answer without thinking about these synonyms. So just because the key word that you're looking for doesn't directly exist in the passage doesn't mean that the concept of the idea of the word isn't there. It might just be hiding under the guise of a synonym. And lastly, this is just your reminder, find to read, don't read to find. Sometimes we can kind of flip the equation a bit. I need to stress this. You're scanning, you're not reading. Reading takes far too much time to do. Scanning is more or less letting your eyes gloss over every sentence as fast as possible, trying to catch the key word that you're looking for. Here's the key. Once you've found it, finding the word is not having the answer. You need to read the sentence carefully, including the sentence before and the sentence after, because the context around the sentence you just read can change your answer. I know this sounds really common sense, and it sounds almost silly, but with the time pressure of verbal reasoning, I can't count how many times I've read the sentence, but it was actually something in the sentence before, the sentence after, that changed the answer that I should have picked. And in the time pressure, you forget these things. So this is just your reminder. The last little S of the KSSS is to scan first and then find your way around. So here's question 4. Narrow spectrum antibiotics are more expensive to produce than broad spectrum antibiotics. So if you do a little scan, you'll end up finding narrow spectrum somewhere around here. And so what I'll be doing is taking my time to actually understand what it says in that last paragraph, because I don't want to rush through it. Otherwise, you just rush and get faster at getting things wrong. And that's not what you want. So if you read through it, then you see something like this. So narrow spectrum antibiotics compared to broad spectrum alternatives whilst maintaining equivalent clinical outcomes, yada, yada, yada. However, these drugs require precise diagnostic testing, which adds time and cost to treatment protocols. So you're seeing narrow spectrum antibiotics and you're seeing more expensive and you're seeing add time and cost and you're thinking, well done, this is true, let's move on. Except that would actually be wrong, because the real answer here is can't tell. And it all comes down to the context. In the rush of trying to get to the answer quicker and quicker, we forget to actually understand what the sentence is saying. Let's have a look at this again. The question is asking about they're more expensive to produce, to make, whereas this is saying, however, these drugs require precise testing, which adds time and cost to the treatment protocols. So when it's used in treatment, that's where it adds the cost, not necessarily in actually producing these things. Now, it doesn't tell us anything about the treatment protocol, so we can't make any deduction, which is why this ends up being a can't tell. So just a little reminder, once you have found your keyword, read carefully around that keyword, sentence before, sentence after, so that you have the context you need to actually answer the question properly. Now, those were just some of the questions that we've gone through. And the only way to improve at this is to just do more and more questions. Now, if you don't already have a question platform to do these questions on, then you can use the code Farhan for 10% off med entry. Otherwise, here are a couple traps that students tend to fall into for keyword scanning. Number one is scanning, but actually reading every sentence slowly and carefully. That's not scanning. That's wasting your time. Number two is choosing high scope keywords that appear in every paragraph, because you're not giving yourself something tangible to scan. It's going to be everywhere, and it doesn't get you any closer to the answer. And lastly, only searching for the exact word and missing obvious synonyms and related context. So being too tunnel visioned on one singular word, even though it might be there just under the guise of a synonym. So here's your do's and don'ts. Do pick one or two low scope keywords from the question before you look back at the passage. Do let your eyes move quickly, trying to catch those keywords or close synonyms. And do read around the keyword so you don't miss important context. Don't choose broad or high scope words that appear everywhere in the passage. Don't read line by line when you're supposed to be scanning. And don't rush to an answer once you've found the keyword, because a lot of people get questions wrong if they just spend an extra 2, 3, 5 seconds trying to understand what the context around the keyword is, they would have got that question correct. So here's the next step. For the next 5 verbal reasoning passages, I want you to use the KSSS method. And in order to see if you're actually improving, track your timing and your accuracy as you go along.